A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my weird prompts. I am Corn Poppleberry, and we are coming to you from our home in Jerusalem. It is a beautiful day here. The sun is hitting the stone walls just right. But we're about to dive into some of the darkest, most calculated corners of human deception. We are talking about the art of not being there, even when you are standing right in front of someone.
And I am Herman Poppleberry. It is great to be back in the studio with you, Corn. Usually, our housemate Daniel sends us an audio prompt to kick things off, but today we decided to take the reins ourselves. We wanted to explore something that has been coming up in a lot of our recent research into national security and geopolitics. It is a concept I like to call the paper trip paradox.
The Paper Trip Paradox. I love that. It sounds like a spy novel title from the 1970s, but explain what you mean by that, Herman. Because when we think of spies, we think of gadgets, fast cars, and high-tech weapons.
And that is the misconception. In the modern world, the most dangerous intelligence assets are not the ones with the best weapons. They are the ones with the most boring, verifiable tax returns. If you have a suppressed pistol and a tuxedo, you are a target. But if you have a mortgage, a history of paying your utility bills on time, and a mediocre grade point average from a state university, you are invisible. To be truly dangerous today, you have to be mundane. You have to be a ghost in the machine.
A ghost in the machine. Not a literal ghost, of course, but a synthetic person. Today we are deconstructing the tradecraft of legend building. This is the institutional process where an intelligence agency creates a fully functional, verifiable human life out of thin air. It is the process of making the fiction become a fact in the eyes of the state.
It is what is known in the business as a legend. And what fascinates me, Corn, is that as we sit here in March of 2026, the challenge of building a legend has changed completely. It used to be about forging a physical passport. Now it is about the digital exhaust. If you do not have a digital footprint that goes back 10 or 15 years, you are a red flag. You cannot just appear in a country today, you have to have existed there or somewhere else for a long time.
That is the core of what we are digging into today. How do you build a human life from scratch that does not trigger a null result when someone runs a background check? How do you handle things like educational history or employment records? It is a massive institutional undertaking that involves thousands of people you will never see.
It really is. And before we get deep into the mechanics, I want to reference something we touched on in episode 975, where we talked about intelligence fronts and front companies. This is the other side of that coin. If the front company is the stage, the legend is the actor and their entire life story before they ever stepped onto that stage. You need both for the play to work.
So, let us start with the definitions. In the intelligence community, there is a distinction between what they call a shallow cover and a deep legend. A shallow cover might just be an alias, right?
Right. A shallow cover is thin. You are using a different name for a hotel check-in or a quick meeting. It is what a case officer might use when they are operating out of an embassy under diplomatic cover. If someone calls the authorities, it might fall apart in an hour, but by then, the meeting is over. But a deep legend? That is something entirely different. A deep legend is a multi-year, sometimes multi-decade, fully backstopped life history.
And who is actually doing this? It is not just the operative sitting in a room making up a story about where they went to high school.
Not at all. There is an entire class of people within agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency or the Mossad or the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service known as support officers or legend makers. In the CIA, this often falls under the Office of Technical Service or OTS. These are the unsung bureaucrats of espionage. Their job is not to go into the field, their job is to manage the mundane details of the operative's fake life. They are the ones interacting with the real-world bureaucracies to make the fiction become a fact. They are the architects of the ghost.
That is the part that blows my mind. The idea that there is a desk officer somewhere whose entire career is dedicated to ensuring that a fake person's social security contributions are paid on time so that the record looks consistent 20 years from now. It is the long game. And the foundational piece of this is what we call backstopping.
Backstopping is the process of providing a verifiable history for every claim in a legend. If an operative claims they went to the University of Michigan in the year 2012, that claim has to be backstopped. If a curious HR manager or a counterintelligence officer calls the registrar's office, there needs to be a record. And not just a record, but a record that looks like it has been sitting there gathering digital dust for 14 years.
So, how do they actually do that? You cannot just call up a university and ask them to add a name to the graduation list. That would create a trail of its own.
Well, there are a few different methods, and they range from high-tech to old-school human intelligence. One is what we call database injection. This is where an agency uses its cyber capabilities to infiltrate a university's legacy record system. These systems are often old, running on outdated software, and they are poorly defended compared to a bank or a government agency. The agency inserts a record for the operative into the database, but they do it retroactively. They place the record in the year 2012, nestled between two real students.
But wait, if they just add a name to a digital database, what about the physical evidence? What about the yearbooks? What about the physical files in a basement somewhere?
That is where the meticulous planning comes in. A good legend maker will choose a university or a program that is large enough that people do not know everyone, or perhaps a program that has since been restructured or moved. But more importantly, they often use the chameleon method. This is a classic piece of tradecraft where they find a real person who actually attended that university but who died young or moved away and disappeared from the public record.
Oh, I have heard of this. This is the dead child method, right? Like in that old movie, The Day of the Jackal?
It was a staple of the KGB illegals program during the Cold War. They would scour graveyards for children who died in infancy. They would take that identity, apply for a replacement birth certificate, and then build a life on top of it. Because the birth record is real, it passes the first level of scrutiny. Then, they layer on the education and the employment. But in the digital age, that has become much harder because of the verification gap.
The verification gap? Explain that.
It is the space between what a piece of paper says and what the digital record says. Today, if I try to use the identity of someone who died in 1965, there is probably a digitized death certificate that is linked to their social security number. The systems talk to each other now. This is why modern legend building has shifted from just forging documents to managing digital footprints. Agencies now have to create what they call a digital backstop.
So, instead of just stealing an identity, they're essentially living the legend into existence before the mission even starts.
Precisely. An operative might spend 3 to 5 years living a quiet, boring life in a neutral country like Canada or New Zealand before they ever move to their actual target destination. During those years, they are generating real digital noise. They are opening bank accounts, they are posting on social media about their boring hobbies, they are getting a library card. They are creating a history of activity that is not just a line in a database, but a web of interconnected records. This is what we call the digital exhaust.
It is fascinating because it means the agency is investing millions of dollars and years of time just to create the background noise of a normal life. If you look at the case of the Russian sleeper cell that was busted in the United States in the year 2010, which was known as Operation Ghost Stories, that is exactly what they did.
Right. And that case is the gold standard for understanding the collapse of a legend. These were people like Anna Chapman, but also couples like the Murphys and the Vicuas. They lived in American suburbs for years. They had kids who did not even know their parents were Russian spies. Their legends were built over decades. Some of them used the identities of deceased Canadians. They had managed to get real passports because they had the foundational documents. But the FBI caught them not because their passports were fake, but because of the patterns in their digital and physical behavior.
I remember reading about that. The FB. I had been watching them for over a decade. They saw the patterns of how they communicated, using shortwave radio bursts or steganography, which is hiding messages inside digital images. The legend was perfect on paper, but the behavior was anomalous.
And that brings us to a really important point about how they handle educational history specifically. Sometimes, the agency will actually enroll the operative in the school. If the mission is high stakes enough, the best way to have a verifiable degree is to actually earn it. The operative attends classes under their alias, takes the exams, and graduates. Now, the record is not a forgery. It is a 100% legitimate record in the university system. The only thing that is fake is the name on the diploma and the history of the person holding it.
That is an incredible investment. You are sending a highly trained intelligence officer to sit through 4 years of undergraduate business classes just so they have a real transcript. It shows you how much they value the integrity of the cover. But what about the roles involved? You mentioned the support officers. How does an agency like the CIA keep this from becoming a diplomatic nightmare? If a foreign government finds out that an American agency is messing with their civil registries, that is a major incident.
It is a huge risk, and this is where we get into the concept of gray documents. These are documents that are technically legal but contextually false. For example, an agency might set up a front company in a country with lax regulations, maybe a small consulting firm in Panama or a logistics company in Cyprus. That company then hires the operative. The company issues real pay stubs, pays real taxes to the local government, and provides a real employment reference.
So the local government is happy because they are getting tax revenue, and they have no reason to suspect the company is anything other than a small business. The documentation is not forged in the traditional sense.
Precisely. The paper is real, the stamps are real, and the signatures are real. It is the intent behind the documents that is the deception. This avoids the legal consequences of forgery because, on the surface, no laws are being broken. The company exists, and the person works there. This is a much safer way to build a legend than trying to print a fake Harvard diploma in a basement.
But what about passports? That seems like the hardest part to get right without a diplomatic incident. You can't just have a gray passport, can you?
Passports are the crown jewels of legend building, and they are handled with extreme care. There are 3 main ways they handle it. One is the altered passport. They take a real, valid passport that was lost or stolen, and they carefully replace the photograph and the biographical page. This is incredibly difficult to do now with biometric chips and holographic overlays. If you mess up the chip, the passport is dead at the first border crossing.
I imagine the technology in those chips makes it almost impossible to just swap a photo. The data on the chip has to match the data on the page.
It does, which leads to the second method, which is the high-quality counterfeit. Agencies have their own printing presses that can replicate the watermarks, the specialized paper, and even the electronic signatures in the chips. But the most effective method, and the one used by top-tier agencies for their most important assets, is the issued in alias passport.
That sounds like they're getting the government to cooperate.
They are. If a CIA operative needs a high-quality legend, the State Department might actually issue a real United States passport in the alias name. This passport is identical to yours or mine. It is in the official system. If a border guard in another country scans it, it comes back as valid because it is a real document issued by the United States government. The deception is at the source.
But that only works for your own country's passports. What if you need to be a Brazilian businessman or a Swedish journalist?
That is where it gets much trickier. That is where you see the heavy reliance on the front companies we talked about in episode 975. The operative might use a real passport from their home country to enter a neutral third country and then use their legend documents to build a new identity there. They might apply for residency, get a local driver's license, and eventually get a passport from that neutral country through legitimate channels. It is a process of identity laundering.
It is like they are taking a dirty identity and running it through the wash of bureaucracy until it comes out clean on the other side. I want to go back to the idea of the institutional trust you mentioned. We tend to believe something if it is in a computer system. But how do they handle the human element? What if someone from that university actually remembers the year 2012 and says, "I don't remember this person"?
That is the beauty of the unremarkable legend. This is a key piece of tradecraft. If you claim you were the star quarterback or the valedictorian, people will remember you. But if you were the quiet guy who sat in the back of the lecture hall, took his notes, and left, no one is going to challenge your existence 10 years later. In fact, a good legend often includes what I call mundane failure.
Mundane failure? Like what?
Maybe the operative has a mediocre grade point average. Maybe they have a few unpaid parking tickets in their history. Maybe they lost a job once because of a company downsizing. If an identity looks too perfect, it is a red flag for counterintelligence officers. Real people have messy lives. They have gaps in their resumes. They have minor brushes with the law. By including these flaws, the legend makers make the identity feel lived in and authentic. It avoids the too perfect red flag.
That is such a counterintuitive insight. You want the spy to be a little bit of a loser so that no one pays attention to them. It reminds me of what we discussed in episode 969, where we talked about the reality of global intelligence being much more bureaucratic than the Hollywood version.
In episode 969, we talked about how real intelligence work is about data management and observation, not high-speed chases. The legend is the ultimate expression of that. You are hiding in the background noise of society. Think about the KGB illegals like the ones portrayed in the show The Americans. They were just travel agents. They were boring. They had marital spats. They worried about their kids' grades. That is the ultimate backstop.
It makes me think about the level of psychological pressure on the operative. You are not just acting. You are living a life that is being monitored and maintained by a bureaucracy thousands of miles away. If you slip up and use your real name at a coffee shop, does the whole thing collapse?
It can. This is what they call the burn protocol. If an identity is flagged, maybe a facial recognition system at an airport catches a match with a known operative, the agency has to decide whether to try to fix it or to pull the operative out immediately. In the digital age, once a legend is burned, it is usually burned everywhere. If a counterintelligence agency finds one flaw, they will pull on that thread until the whole thing unravels.
We saw that with the Russian illegals in 2010. The FBI had been watching them for years. They did not just find one fake passport, they mapped the entire network of their lives. They saw the patterns of how they communicated and how they moved money. The digital exhaust eventually caught up with them. Even though their legends were perfect on paper, their behavior was not.
And that brings us to a really interesting point about the future of this tradecraft. We are moving into an era of biometric and blockchain verified credentials. How do you build a legend when your identity is tied to your iris scan or your fingerprints from the moment you are born?
That seems like the end of the traditional legend, doesn't it? If the world moves to a system where every birth is recorded on a permanent, immutable ledger, you cannot just inject a record into a database anymore.
It certainly makes it much harder. We are seeing agencies pivot toward what they call synthetic identity theft on a massive scale. Instead of creating one person, they create thousands of fake personas using a mix of real and fabricated data. They use artificial intelligence to generate faces that do not belong to any real person, but look perfectly natural in a LinkedIn profile picture.
So the goal is to overwhelm the system with so much noise that the real operatives can move undetected within the crowd of fake identities. It is a shift from the artisan craft of the Cold War to a high-tech automated manufacturing of identity.
Precisely. It is a shift from quality to quantity, but the core principle remains the same. You are exploiting the gaps in institutional trust. You are betting that the person checking the ID or the computer running the background check will accept the record at face value because it looks like everything else in the system.
It is fascinating and a little bit terrifying when you think about it. If our identities are just a collection of database entries, how easy is it for a sophisticated actor to become us, or to create someone who is just as real as we are on paper? It really highlights the importance of what we do here, Ermin. We try to look past the surface level of these topics.
It really does. And I think there is a practical takeaway here for our listeners. We often talk about our privacy and our digital footprints in terms of marketing or data brokers. But in the world of intelligence, that digital footprint is your shield. The more unique and verifiable your life is, the harder it is for someone to replicate it.
That is a great point. You should almost do an audit of your own digital legend. If someone wanted to prove you existed, what would they find? They would find your school records, your tax filings, your social media posts from 10 years ago. For most of us, that trail is so long and so messy that it would be nearly impossible to fake perfectly.
It is the messiness that makes us real. The spies have to work so hard to simulate the chaos of a real life while we just live it every day. The chaos of reality is the best defense against the precision of a legend.
I love that. The chaos of reality. And we have covered some related ground in other episodes. If you are interested in the physical side of this, how they hide in plain sight, you should definitely check out episode 521, where we talked about safe houses and the physical infrastructure of cover.
And if you want to hear about a real-world case where a legend was maintained for years at the highest levels of a government, episode 966 on Eli Cohen is a must-listen. He was an Israeli spy who became so well integrated into the Syrian government that he was almost named their deputy minister of defense. His legend was so good that he was essentially living as a high-ranking Syrian official.
That is one of the most incredible stories in the history of espionage. It shows you that a well-constructed legend is not just a tool, it is a weapon. It can open doors that no army can kick down. It can change the course of history without a single shot being fired.
It really can. Well, we have covered a lot of ground today, from university registrars to the Russian sleeper cells of the suburbs. I think it is important to remember that while this stuff sounds like a movie, it is happening every day. There are people walking around right now, maybe in your neighborhood or mine, who exist only because a support officer in a windowless room decided that they should.
It is a sobering thought. But it is also a testament to human ingenuity and the incredible complexity of the systems we have built to manage our societies. We have created a world where we can be verified by a machine, and that creates an opportunity for anyone who knows how to talk to that machine.
Well said, Korn. I think we should start wrapping this one up. It has been a deep dive, but I feel like we have only scratched the surface of how the intelligence community operates. The intersection of technology and human nature is where the most interesting stories live.
I couldn't agree more. And if you enjoyed this episode, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find the show and helps us keep doing this.
Yeah, it really does make a difference. We love hearing from you all. You can find our full archive and a way to get in touch with us at our website, myweirdprompts.com. We have over 900 episodes there covering everything from ancient history to the latest in technology.
And a big thanks to our housemate Daniel for being the catalyst for so many of our discussions, even if we took the lead on this one ourselves today. Living together in Jerusalem always gives us plenty of interesting things to talk about over dinner.
It certainly does. Well, that is it for this episode of My Weird Prompts. I am Herman Poppleberry.
And I am Corn Poppleberry. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.
It is interesting, Korn, as we are closing out, I was thinking about the concept of the synthetic identity in the context of the blockchain. We talked about it briefly, but do you think that actually solves the problem, or does it just create a new set of vulnerabilities?
That is the million-dollar question, Herman. Every time we build a better lock, someone builds a better pick. If we move to a blockchain identity, the goal for an intelligence agency then becomes to compromise the private keys or the initial entry point of that data. It just shifts the battlefield from the registrar's office to the digital wallet.
So the legend makers of the future will not be forging birth certificates. They will be hacking the genesis blocks of our identities. It is a never-ending arms race.
And that is why we will always have something to talk about on this show. Alright, let us actually sign off now before we start a whole new 20-minute discussion on cryptography.
Good call. Until next time, everyone.
Take care.
We should probably mention that we are a team, not debaters, like we always say. I think we did a good job of building on each other's points today.
I think so too. It is much more productive to explore the nuances together. The world is complicated enough without us arguing over the basics.
Right. And for the regular listeners who know our dynamic, they know that when I get excited about the technical details, you are there to ask the questions that bring it back to the real-world implications. It is a good balance.
It works for us, and hopefully it works for the listeners too. See you all in the next episode.
Goodbye, everyone.
One last thing, Herman. Did you actually check if there were any parking tickets on your record lately? You wouldn't want to look too perfect, right?
Very funny, Korn. I will have you know that my record is perfectly messy, just the way a real human should be. I have a library book that is 3 days overdue as we speak.
Now that is a solid backstop. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Actually, before we go, I was thinking about the educational part again. If an operative is in a country and they need to prove their degree, they usually have to provide a transcript. How do they handle the physical transcript with the official seal?
That is another layer of the backstopping. Agencies have the ability to create those seals. They have master engravers who can replicate the texture of the paper and the raised ink of the seal. But again, the best way is to have an insider. This is where the recruitment of assets comes in. An agency might have a contact inside a university's administrative office who can print a real transcript on real paper with the real seal, but for the fake student.
So it is not just hacking or forgery. It is also good old-fashioned human intelligence.
It is always a mix. The best legends are a blend of high-tech digital work, physical forgery, and human cooperation. It is a total institutional effort. It is not just one person, it is a whole government working to make one person exist.
It really is a massive undertaking. It makes you realize why only a few nations have the capability to run these kinds of deep cover programs effectively. It requires a level of organizational discipline and resources that most countries simply do not have.
It is a hallmark of a top-tier intelligence service, and it is one of the reasons why agencies like the ones in the United States, Russia, and Israel are so respected and feared in this arena. They have the infrastructure to make the impossible look mundane.
Well, on that note, we are definitely done. Thanks for the extra insights, Herman.
Anytime, Corn.
All right, for real this time. Thanks for listening to My Weird Prompts. Check out myweirdprompts.com for more.
See you soon.
I think we really hit the word count target this time, Herman. We went deep.
I hope so. There was a lot to cover. It is a fascinating topic.
Oh, it really is. Okay, let us go get some coffee.
Sounds good.
You're paying, right? Since you're the one with the legendary employment history.
Nice try, Corn. We'll split it.
Fair enough. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Wait, did we mention the reviews?
Yes, Corn. We mentioned the reviews.
Okay, just making sure. It really does help.
It does. All right, let's go.
Okay, we're going.
Talk to you all later.
Bye.
Bye.
One more thing.
Corn,
Just kidding. Let's go.
you're impossible.
I'm a sloth, remember? We take our time.
And I'm a donkey, and I'm losing my patience.
All right. Heading out.
See you in the next one.
Peace.
Take care.
Bye.
Buddy.
Seriously, check out episode 521. It's a good one.
Yes, it is. Now come on.
I'm coming.
Good.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Herman, do you think we should have talked more about the psychological toll on the support officers?
Maybe in a future episode. It's a whole other topic.
True. Okay, now I'm really done.
Thank goodness.
Bye.
Bye.
Seriously, though? The support officers?
You're going.
Okay. Going now.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts.